Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Charlotte Ashton and I'm from Farley Solicitors, doing this webinar on employing international talent, specifically focusing on employing international graduates. So to begin with, I just wanted to remind everyone on the obligations that employers have generally, irrespective of who they're intending to employ. So first of all, there's the duty to prevent illegal working, which means that you need to be carrying out checks on all prospective employees' right to work to make sure that before they start employment, they have the right to work in the UK. You need to be carrying that out before they start employment, and again, where someone's got limited leave to remain. So they've got a visa with an expiry date on it, and you'll need to carry out a further check once they get to that date. You're also under the duty not to discriminate unlawfully against job applicants. So the Equality Act covers job applicants, so someone doesn't actually have to be your employee to bring a claim against you. You can't assume someone's got the right to work or not got the right to work at the outset, and you should avoid discriminatory statements in your job adverts. So you shouldn't be implying that only certain nationalities can apply for your job. What you can do is state that by the time of employment, the individual must have the right to work in the UK. So moving on to how international students can work legally in the UK, there are three main options that we're going to be looking at. First of all, there's the Tier 4 terms for international students, meaning that whilst they're here on their Tier 4 visa, they have the right to work in certain circumstances. So that means that there's no input from the employer as to having to sponsor the individual. They have the right to work attached to their Tier 4 visa. For longer term work, there's a Tier 2 visa, which is for skilled work and is for those people who would be sponsored by an employer. And there's a Tier 5 option for people who are sponsored by an overarching organisation. So I briefly covered those, and here are the sort of more detailed terms of them. So with Tier 4, students can generally work 20 hours a week term time or 40 hours a week outside of term time and after the course has ended. That will be specified on the biometric residence permit, which you would need a copy of to employ them. And you'd also need confirmation from the university as to what periods are classed as term time and what periods are classed as vacation periods, because you need to ensure that they're not going to be in breach of their visa by working longer hours for you on a certain week. Longer term, Tier 2, like I say, is for permanent skilled work. There are obligations on the employer who would have to act as a sponsor of the individual. And Tier 5 is generally for fixed periods of 1 to 2 years for internships or work experience, and there are fewer obligations on the employer. So Tier 2 sponsorship, which is the main sort of route for people to be working in the UK, it's for skilled workers. There are two routes: restricted, where someone is outside the UK and looking to come to the UK for the first time on this Tier 2 visa. So they'd be subject to the annual limit of 20,800. And the unrestricted route, which is where someone is able to take a Tier 2 job without having to go through that restricted process. There is a Tier 2 general visa, which is where someone's recruited as a new individual to the company to fill a skilled role. And there's a Tier 2 intra-company transfer route, which is where you're a global organisation and you want to move someone from one of your offices abroad to work in the UK. All these options require the employer to hold a sponsor licence, and there are also minimum salary thresholds across the board for Tier 2. If you are keen to employ someone on a Tier 2 visa, you should probably start with looking at whether the job's going to be skilled enough. Because if the job isn't going to be considered skilled enough for Tier 2, then there's no point in going through the process to obtain the sponsor licence. So you need to take a look at Appendix J, which is online, and it sets out codes for each type of job, sets out job duties, suggested job titles, and the rates of pay for that type of job. So you would have a look at that, compare it to the job description, look at what duties are under that, consider whether there are any lower skilled duties which are going to make UKVI say that it's a lower skilled job, And if you're finding it difficult, you can actually email for clarification. You can email the Office of National Statistics to get them to explain to you where they think the proposed job falls. Only those jobs at skill level 6 or above will be considered to be skilled enough. So if it's a lower skill level job, you won't be able to sponsor them under Tier 2. You also need to have a look at the proposed salary for the jobs. There are 2 rates. Generally speaking, across the jobs, there is the new entrant rate and the experienced worker rate. So with the new entrant rate, the base threshold is 20,800 or higher if the job itself states a higher rate. And for the experienced worker rate, it's 30,000 or higher. You also need to be careful what hours a week those salaries are for. If you're going to be employing someone on a salary which in Appendix J is stated to be for 37.5 hours a week, but you're going to employ them for 40 hours a week, the visa application will fail because the pro rata salary is too low. If you have got a skilled job and you've got the correct salary, then you need to consider how to get the license. You need to apply to the Home Office to show that you're a genuine organisation, that you can be trusted to comply with your obligations as a sponsor. So you'll need to show evidence that you are a genuine organisation. So that would include things like bank statements, showing that you've got, showing where your premises are, showing that you have been trading for a certain period of time if you're a small organisation, like a new sort of startup organisation. You will also need to explain why you need the licence and why you want to employ someone who needs a Tier 2 visa. And there's success generally where the student is already known to the organisation. So if it is a student who's been working for you for a period of time, you've got something you can build into your supporting letter to explain this person's already known to us, they've already been working for us, they're a valuable member of our team, and now we want to sponsor them under Tier 2 to keep them with us and build their career with us. Where the student isn't already working for you, it can be useful to undertake a recruitment process anyway, so that you can show evidence that you did have some applications, but this person was the best person for the job. Whilst you don't need to go through the resident labour market test, which I'll discuss shortly, you will need to show that there is a genuine reason why you need this sponsor licence. You need to consider the timings carefully because it can take 8 weeks to get a licence. That could be longer if you're visited by the Home Office prior to getting the licence. And the Tier 4 expiry date could be fast approaching. And if that date passes, that means the student would have to return to their home country and they'll no longer be able to switch. So they'll no longer be under the unrestricted route and that sort of lower salary. Fees for the sponsor license vary depending on the size of your organisation. For a small or medium employer, it's £536. For a large employer, it's £1,476, and it's £199 per certificate of sponsorship. The Tier 2 restricted process. So Tier 4 switching benefits from not having to go through the restricted process. You don't have to advertise the job to show no one else can do it, and you can pay the new entrant rate. Where you're on the Tier 2 restricted process, you would have to advertise the job in 2 places for 28 days and show that no settled worker is suitable. That means you have to carry out the recruitment process, and you can only reject a settled worker, so that's someone who's got the right to work in the UK without having to hold an extra visa, where they don't meet the requirements as set out in the job advert. The higher salary threshold may apply, which could mean that the job then isn't going to be paid enough to sponsor that person. And you have to apply through the monthly allocation process. For Tier 5, this is for shorter term work and there are restrictions on switching. One type of Tier 5 visa is the Youth Mobility Scheme, where you're a national of a certain country and you're aged between 18 to 30, you can apply from your home country and come to the UK to work for up to 2 years on that visa. The government authorised exchange visa is where there's an overarching sponsor who sponsors your visa, sponsors the individual rather than the employer doing it. So we'll take a look at that one in more detail. So it's generally for work experience or internships. The employer is not the sponsor, and it can be for a maximum of 1 to 2 years, depending on the scheme. There are 4 subcategories, and if you take a look at the Tier 5 Government Authorised Exchange gov.uk page, it sets out, there is a list there of all the different types of schemes. You can see which might be applicable for the circumstances you're in. Again, the employer is not the sponsor, so there's sort of fewer obligations on the employer, and there's no salary threshold like with Tier 2. It's just national minimum wage that would apply. You can apply to join a Tier 5 scheme, and that's slightly less onerous than obviously having to jump through all the hoops for a Tier 2 application. There are costs in that though, and I've used the Access Tier 5, which is one type of scheme, as an example, and their registration is £600, and then sponsorship can be £750 upwards. And it's generally for supernumerary positions, which means it would be a person above your usual headcount for the business. So students can switch from Tier 4 to Tier 5 government authorised exchange, but they would not be able to switch into Tier 2 at the end. So they would have to leave the UK at the end of that visa and apply to come back on either a Tier 2 or another type of appropriate visa. I'm just going to pass you over to Nolene now for covering targeted international recruitment.
We have at the University of Manchester International Talent, which is aimed at businesses seeking languages skills or country knowledge. If you're working in exporting to other countries, or if you have activities that you conduct in other countries overseas that may require specialist knowledge of the economy, the country cultures, or the language ability. We have students and graduates here at the University of Manchester with a wide variety of language skills, including Mandarin, French, German, Arabic, Russian, and many, many more. It's a very, very diverse student population here at the University of Manchester, with over 11,000 international students on campus, as well as a large number of students specifically studying languages. So if you are looking for somebody with country knowledge, language ability, to translate documents, do some market research for you, give you insight into certain markets, business etiquette, cultures, or you're looking to, for example, make an appointment or a booking at a trade fair. We can help here at the University of Manchester with those needs. If you would like to advertise an opportunity or speak to one of the team for some further information, you can contact us on the number displayed there, 0161 275 2465, or you can email us directly, recruitment@manchester.ac.uk.
So I hope that's been a useful webinar for you. If you've got any other questions, our contact details are there, so you can email me if you'd like to find out more about the Tier 2 process. You can follow us on the usual social media platforms, and if you've got any more questions specifically about graduates and careers, you can email the Manchester University address there. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.